Rogers. The song you just heard is called Kings and Queens. Today we are going to talk with Jeffrey Smith, author of the book Seeds of Deception and maker of the film Genetic Roulette. His meticulous research documents how biotech companies continue to mislead legislators and safety officials to put the health of society at risk and the environment in peril. Before I introduce Jeffrey, I would just like to say that I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley. My father was a farmer after he got out of World War II. 4 or 5 years is all he could last in the farming business. He told me that a new insect pest was brought in every year and a new chemical to control it. They covered every inch of the valley with blankets of chemicals. 2 years after I left Fresno, about 1978, the health authorities noted significant cancer clusters around the valley and found that the wells were contaminated by agricultural chemicals. Not only that, but there has been a concerted effort to de-farm this country and get rid of small farmers. It is done through the Farm Bill that Congress enacts every so often. The Farm Bill continuously, predictably, and relentlessly mitigates against small farmers and greatly furthers the interests of industrial agriculture. Now, here we are trying to unravel the effect of having corporations grow food instead of farmers. And to help us do that, I want to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Smith. Hello, Jeffrey.
Hi, great to be here.
So, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, Jeffrey? What motivated you to study GMOs and all the issues surrounding that?
Well, I learned about GMOs in 1996, just before they were planted widely in the United States. I learned about them from a genetic engineer who had actually been doing genetic engineering and knew intimately that the process was quite dangerous. He described in a lecture that I attended how the process of genetic engineering, the insertion of a foreign gene, the cloning of a cell into a plant, how it's entirely unnatural, unprecedented, but more so how it creates massive collateral damage in the plant itself, and it can create new allergens or toxins or higher levels of existing allergens or toxins, and that none of that was being evaluated before the crops went on the market. So I realized I needed to share that information with others, and with a background in education and marketing and communications, I started to translate his concerns into English in a way that others could appreciate it. And I've been doing that ever since.
Well, thank you for doing that. I've been aware of it for quite a while, and I know about, 10 years ago or so, and I heard about it, how extensive it had become, because Jeremy Rifkin had told us about it years before that, and I lost my appetite, and I got angry, but I couldn't keep that up, so I had to just forget about it. But then the GMO things keeps coming up, and I found on Facebook somebody had posted a connection to the interview you did with Dr.
Senate?
Yeah, Dr. Sinef, and that was an astounding revelation, and it gave a scientific reason for why glyphosate causes such health effects. It just was so astounding; it blew my mind. And I covered that on one of my shows, which turned out to be very popular. And
so did the interview. Dr. Mercola picked it up, and etc. So let me give the readers a little background. First of all, if you go to our site responsibletechnology.org, there is the interview, a video interview with me and Dr. Stephanie Seneff from MIT. Now, she did an article on Roundup's active ingredient, glyphosate, with another author, Anthony Samsel. Now, I just interviewed Anthony as well, and his story is also amazing. And he's part of our GMO Summit. We're interviewing, John Robbins and I will be interviewing 10 people this weekend, October 25th, 26th, and 27th, And then another 10 people were doing pre-interviews, including Dr. Anthony Samsel, where I'm doing most of those in-depth interviews with scientists, etc. This is totally free. And so go to gmosummit.org and sign up. You get an entire GMO survival kit when you sign up, and you'll have access to Robin O'Brien, a fantastic supermom who many people are inspired by, Vandana Shiva, this incredible activist from India, Andy Kimbrell, who's been suing the FDA and USDA for years, even going to the Supreme Court. We have a pro-GMO guy from the Canadian government who was actually part of his job was to convince people that GMOs were safe. Now he doesn't think they're safe. So he's completely changed his opinion. He's going to give us some powerful information. And we have a 13-year-old or 14-year-old now, Rachel Parent, who's a YouTube debate with a Canadian talk show host on GMOs, has about 2 million views now. Anyway, I'm getting off the topic because I mentioned Anthony Samsel. So Anthony, I spoke to him already. The glyphosate in their article, which was published in the journal Entropy, it says in the abstract that the implications of the biochemical problems related to glyphosate are links to cancer, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, multiple sclerosis, although that's in the body of it, autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, aggression, depression. If you look at the details, it's astounding. You see, glyphosate is totally unique as a molecule, and if you look at what it does, it may be one of the greatest health disasters in human history.
Yeah, and I've been trying to research why so many people are on antidepressants and why we have mass killings and shootings. And that I noticed that all of those people who were on one of the SSRI drugs, the selective serotonin uptake inhibitor drugs. And I wondered what was up with that. And then when I saw the link between glyphosate and our lowered serotonin levels, it set off alarms. And so I've been...
The way that works is this. I'm going to bring us, this is biochemistry here, and we're going to do biochemistry for the masses. So I'm going to slow it way down here. All right. So glyphosate, the active ingredient in Roundup, which is the world's best-selling weed killer by Monsanto, one of the ways it kills the plants is it blocks a certain metabolic pathway. It doesn't let it do its job. And that pathway is called the shikimate pathway. Now, Monsanto had said for years, oh, don't worry, we can take Roundup internally ourselves because we don't have a shikimate pathway, only plants do, and bacteria does. But that second word, bacteria, never dawned on people that, oh, we have gut bacteria in our gut. That is an incredibly important aspect of our health. And we are blocking the shikimate pathway. It does something else to gut bacteria as well, which we can talk about in a minute. But just this one aspect, the pathway, the shikimate pathway creates certain amino acids that are not made normally elsewhere. And like, for example, tryptophan. Tryptophan is a precursor to serotonin. Most of the tryptophan that's available or produced in us comes from our gut bacteria. If we take the glyphosate, if we eat food that has Roundup sprayed on it, it may block the ability of our gut bacteria to produce tryptophan. That in turn can block the production of serotonin. It can also block melatonin, which is linked to sleep disorders. And it's a very, very serious issue, not only for mood and behavior, but serotonin also tells the body, all right, I'm hungry, I'm finished eating, I'm full. So that satiated feeling can come from the presence of serotonin. So we may not stop eating. And this also the same gut bacteria problem is also linked to neurodegenerative disorders and cancer through other biochemical pathways. And that's just one of about 8 things that glyphosate does. And that's pretty serious because that can link the Roundup with depression and aggression. Now that's the theoretical piece here, and I was talking at MIT with Stephanie Seneff to an audience, and I invited her to participate and share her information about glyphosate, and I gave all the information about GMOs. And then I asked the audience, has anyone gotten rid of GMOs and noticed an improvement in their health? A woman shot up her hand and said, my 6.5-year-old son was violent and out of control and they wanted to kick him out of school. I saw your film, Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives. I changed his diet immediately because in the movie we talk about parents from autistic kids have changed their autistic child's diet to be non-GMO. They noticed a dramatic improvement. Animals that have been taken off of GMOs noticed a dramatic health improvement. So it's very convincing. And it's changing people's lives all over the world now. So she changed her kid's diet, and she said he was dramatically changed within a week, and in a month she had a new son. None of the problems persisted. They don't want to kick him out of school, and he's doing fine.
That's pretty convincing. Now we have some critics of our anti-GMO attitude say that the experiments have been done to prove this is safe, and it came out in Scientific American, evidently, which is kind of like a trade journal for armchair scientists, I guess.
So we have figured out through careful and meticulous analysis when these biotech advocates are lying, and it's when their lips are moving.
Exactly.
There are a bunch of myths and talking points that are circulated among the captured minions, and then they in turn can often convince a whole nother generation of people that they believe this rhetoric because they've heard it over and over again. But if you deal with independent scientists who really know the truth, there's absolutely no body of evidence that proves that GMOs are safe. In fact, it's just the opposite. I'll give you one example. Dr. Judy Carman of Australia had been given a grant from Western Australian government to do testing with animals. And there's very few long-term animal feeding studies. And the biotech industry was really scared that she was going to come up with something that would be a problem. And they've done everything they could to discredit her and try and get her kicked out of whatever lab she was working at. And they sent a letter to the Minister of Agriculture from Western Australia. And they said, see, here's a report. 150 abstracts of studies that show that GMOs are safe. No more studies are necessary. We can stop the research in its tracks. We can stop science. We're done. You should get the money back. So first of all, you're feeding a product of an immature science to 1 billion people or more. Now it's probably billions of people. And there's no reason why you should stop research. But when Judy was asked by the Minister of Agriculture to examine what they had given, of the 150 abstracts, I think all but 9 of them were commercial animal feeding studies. They had nothing to do with safety. They were talking about things like, weight gain or the size of the breasts of the chickens after eating the GM corn or soy. They were completely irrelevant. Of the 9 that had to do with safety, 6 of them showed adverse findings, and they had left out a dozen or more that showed even more adverse findings. Now, since then, we've seen GMOs related to sterility, to smaller babies and fewer babies, to damage in the testicles, in the uterus, in the ovaries, in the pancreas, in the liver, in the kidneys, massive multiple tumors, early death, all sorts of things in the animal feeding studies. Not to mention what people are reporting when they get rid of GMOs in their diet, which is even more convincing for many people.
Great information. Well, what are the other problems associated with GMOs, such as the effect on small farmers, food diversity, the saving of seeds, the whole patenting of life forms? I wish we could go back to whatever court decided, the patent court or somebody,
Supreme Court. The
Supreme
Supreme
Court
Court.
decided that the patent office could patent life forms. Are there any religious people out there that may believe in God, that God is supposed to be the one to do all of this, not us?
And it's
Where is their voice?
that GMO means God move over.
Exactly.
Well, go to faithandgmos.org and you'll see videotapes we've done on with a rabbi and ministers and a swami. There are plenty of religious people that believe GMO means God move over and that GMOs are, quote, an abomination or a sin or whatnot. So we're about to get off the health topic. Now, we've only scratched the surface on the
Okay,
health
let's
topic.
keep going though then on the
All right,
health
all right,
topic
all right,
because
all
that's
right.
probably the most important thing.
All right. So to me, I mean, it is the most important thing because unless someone realizes the gravity of the situation, then they can dismiss what's happening with farmers more easily. But it's hard to dismiss if you eat a corn chip and it turns your intestinal bacteria into living pesticide factories, which drill holes in the cell walls of your guts, causing leaky gut, which is linked to cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autism, inflammation, food allergies, and autoimmune disease.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me unpack that sentence for you now that I've got your attention.
Yeah.
All right. So corn can be genetically engineered with one of two traits. It can produce a toxin that breaks open the stomach of insects to kill them. That's a toxin called Bt toxin. And the corn plant is a registered insecticide. And it also can be Roundup ready, meaning you could spray it with Roundup and it won't die. It can also be Liberty Link, which means you spray it with Liberty herbicide or glufosinate and it won't die. Now, if we look at those two toxins, the Bt toxin and let's say the herbicide toxin Roundup, it's amazing what it can do to the gut walls, to the gut bacteria, to the integrity of our digestion. Looking at Bt first, they found that it does poke holes in human cells just like in insects. Now, if it pokes holes in the walls of the intestines, then larger pieces of undigested food proteins can get into the bloodstream. This can elicit an attack by the immune system, not used to getting these type of things. That inflammatory or immune response can then create all sorts of other responses. There can be something called molecular mimicry where these new food particles are then, they kind of take a mugshot or snapshot of it for the immune system to say, attack this, but they may get it wrong and attack things that are looking like that, like the thyroid or the gut walls, like the microvilli. So you have an autoimmune disease. The chemicals and bacteria from inside the gut can pour into the bloodstream. The leaky gut syndrome or leaky gut phenomena is linked to, for example, celiac disease. And we have a whole paper called asking whether GMOs are promoting gluten-related disorders like celiac. That's available at glutenandgmos.com. So glutenandgmos.com will describe that. So the Bt toxin, if it's poking holes in human cells, it could be causing all sorts of diseases and disorders. But the biotech industry said, don't worry, it's destroyed in the stomach. But that's also not true. In the blood of 93% of the pregnant women tested and 80% of their unborn fetuses. They also found that it can damage the blood cells of mice. So if it's getting into our bloodstream, then it could be messing up our blood. And if it's getting into the fetuses, it might get into their brains because the blood-brain barrier is not well developed. So you have a hole-poking toxin that's in our blood, in the brains of our unborn fetuses, and it also has properties of an allergen, and is known to produce allergic reactions. So it's also maybe promoting immune system responses, in a big way. Now, there's also the possibility that the gene that produces the Bt toxin can transfer into the DNA of gut bacteria, and our own gut bacteria may produce it on a 24/7 basis, turning it into living pesticide factories, which might explain why so many pregnant women in Canada had the Bt toxin in their blood.
Really? Could you just explain that last thing again? How our own bacteria could start doing that?
All right,
Our
so
own cells.
I'm going to describe a study that was published in Nature Biotechnology in 2004. Now, this was a study not on the Bt gene. This was a study on Roundup Ready soybeans. The soybeans have a gene inserted into their DNA that allow the Roundup to survive Roundup Ready soy to survive applications of the Roundup. So it can survive the sprays that would normally kill the crop. They found that people ended up getting the part of that Roundup Ready gene integrated into the DNA of the bacteria living inside their intestines. In other words, the intestinal flora. The intestinal flora picked up the gene from the food, and that those gut bacteria were unkillable with Roundup. Because of the gene, it means that the gene is functioning, meaning producing a genetically engineered protein on a continuous basis 24/7 inside our guts. Yeah. Now, as soon as the pro-GM UK government, who was funding the study, found out about it, they withdrew the funds so that there was no funds. The Bt toxin gene transfer. But we eat corn chips that have genes that produce Bt toxin, and if the gene that produces the toxin, which pokes the holes and causes immune reactions, if that were to transfer to our gut bacteria, and once transferred, if it were functioning, it would produce this toxin 24/7 inside of our guts. And that might explain why, and you can look at our chart. So here's something you can do. If you sign up for the GMO Summit at gmosummit.org, which is free, you have access to a GMO survival kit. The charts in the survival kit has along the top in the rate of inflammatory bowel disease in the United States, the rate of constipation, the rate of irritable bowel and peritonitis, all inflammatory gut problems, linking it to the growth of Bt corn plantings in the United States. And if you look at it, it is matched dramatically, supporting the notion, not proving, supporting the notion that consumption of Bt toxin may be causing gastrointestinal problems in the U.S. And of course, when we ask audiences, have you gotten rid of GMOs and just an improvement, the number one most popular improvement in every audience is digestive disorders.
Wasn't the Bt corn only supposed to be given to animals and not humans?
Well, not necessarily. The Bt corn was approved for both animals and humans. There was one variety of Bt corn called Starlink. Oh, yeah. That was only approved for animals. And I used to work at a GMO detection laboratory, and activists sent us taco shells from Kraft, and the laboratory looked at it, and I got a call. I was the vice president of marketing. I got a call from the lab one day, and it said, "We just found Starlink corn in taco shells." And we told the client, and they told the press, and it was $1 billion problem.
Yeah, Taco Bell. Was it Taco Bell?
It was Taco Bell's tacos shells that were produced by Kraft, and 315 different products were subject to recall. The foreign markets closed their doors to U.S. exported corn. The price of corn plummeted. Aventis, the company which has been taken over by Bayer Crop Science, was sued, had to pay a fortune, and that was an example of government stupidity, claiming that you can allow a corn to be planted that's only supposed to be fed to animals and not humans. What were they thinking? It's just as stupid as saying you can plant GMOs in the same environment as organic and there won't be cross-pollination. We now know that that's a lie and a myth.
Yeah. Well, we maybe, let's see, Larry, do you want to do the top of the hour now? We'll take a couple of minutes, Jeffrey, to do our top of the hour identification and thanking our sponsors, and we'll be right back. This is Bud Rogers, Judge of the Herd. We're going to turn it over to Larry for the health effects of GMOs. Hi, Jeffrey. We were talking about Bt corn and how toxic that is to ourselves, not just the insects.
When you think of this, just the Bt toxin itself, that can explain two categories of problems that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine said were afflicting the lab animals fed GMOs. And that's immune system problems and gastrointestinal problems, as well as a third, organ damage. So you have a hole poking toxin that's also an immunogen or an allergen, and that by itself can explain some of these issues. But there's stiff competition from the other main toxin, which we started out talking about, which was Roundup, or its active ingredient, glyphosate. Glyphosate blocks another metabolic pathway, not just the one that produces tryptophan. It blocks one that helps the body detox, the CYP450 for the technical people, but that normally the body will detox using a certain metabolic pathway. Part of that gets dismantled in the presence of Roundup or glyphosate. So that means that all the other toxins in the environment may be enhanced because Roundup is in the system. Roundup also grabs nutrients and makes them unavailable. It chelates key minerals so that we don't have the access to the percentage of minerals that we require to do the functioning in our bodies if depending on how much of the Roundup we're consuming. It also is an endocrine disruptor. So it can, in the animal feeding studies, it's caused increased estrogen in men, increased testosterone in women, and it's also caused organ damage in the pituitary, liver, and kidney. It also promotes cancer cells to grow. So breast cancer cells grow at levels that are a tiny amount compared to what's allowed on the food that we're eating. Now, Roundup Ready crops are sprayed with Roundup. The Roundup doesn't just stay on the surface. There's a surfactant that drives it into the tissue. Only 15 to 20% actually leave the crop. The rest remain in the crop, a significant portion of which is in the food portion that we eat. So if we eat Roundup Ready crops, we're consuming Roundup that can't be washed off. And so this may be related to this long list of diseases that I mentioned earlier. So you have the other categories of diseases that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine said were reproductive disorders, as well as the gastrointestinal, immune, and organ damage, and accelerated aging, and dysfunctional regulation of cholesterol and insulin. If you look at the chemical properties of Roundup, you can see how it can affect insulin production and regulation, cholesterol or cholesterol sulfate transport, and reproductive disorders for sure. Female rats fed Roundup Ready soybeans starting 2 weeks before they got pregnant. More than half of their babies died within 3 weeks. Hamsters on GM soy, by the third generation, most were sterile. Some had hair growing in their mouths.
Oh my God. You wouldn't want your girlfriend to eat that, right?
It's not an image that I cherish. Thank you.
That's pretty awesome. What was I just thinking? I remembered. Oh, Mexico, I heard banned GMO corn.
Yeah, it was actually the court that said there was an environmental peril and that as long as the court case was ongoing, that they needed to stop planting until the final court ruled. It was very, very good news. And also the Kauai County Council passed a bill saying that the biotech companies on Kauai must divulge the agricultural chemicals that they're using and the locations of the GMOs that are being planted, which was a huge victory. I testified before the Hawaii County Council, and they're going to pass soon, I believe, or they've already passed it once. They're going to have to confirm it soon. A ban on all planting of GMOs in the Big Island. There's a lot of news, a lot of good news coming from around the world on the GMO front.
Yeah, Humboldt County has people working on this on something for the 2014 ballot in Humboldt County to see if they could get the planting of GMOs banned. It's too bad we couldn't just ban anything with GMO in it. People wouldn't have very much to eat for a while, but I think they'd be healthier.
So are you still hearing me clear? Because you're a little distorted
Yes.
on this.
Oh,
Okay,
am
good.
I you hearing me okay?
No, you're a little distorted. So if you turn off your video, it'll be a little easier for me.
Okay.
So I wanted to let you know last year, the San Juan Islands in Washington banned the planting of GMOs there, which was a great news. In Oregon, Jackson County wanted to do the same, but the biotech industry was able to get the state government to preempt any county's ability to do the same. So that's the big issue. They've done that, I think, in 15 states now, where they make it illegal for counties to ban the planting of GMOs.
That sounds a lot similar to the new trade agreement that they're negotiating in secret. Uh, do they call the FPP?
Trans-Pacific Partnership?
T, yeah, Trans-Pacific Part TPP,
Yeah.
and that will have the same effect, from what I understand. It
You
will
know,
preclude us from being able to control food safety and things like that.
well, treaties do they do supersede national law, and that's why the WTO has been such a danger. The Bush administration sued Europe, claiming that their rejection of GMOs was an illegal trade barrier. Um, so there is and the U.S. uses bilateral trade agreements all the time to try and bully countries into accepting GMOs or preventing labeling. Um, I don't know if the TRIPS agreement has that in it. I've heard people say that it does, but I've never seen any documentation to back that up. But it is another example of how the democracy is being undermined by the corporatocracy. The negotiators for that particular treaty include, I think, 600 corporate representatives, but no one from Congress or has been even allowed to see the document. So this is how the democracy has been displaced by corporate interests. There are some countries that have asked the U.S. to consult in the past about intellectual property right law, and the response by the government was to send a representative of Monsanto to inform the government how to set up intellectual property rights. It's amazing what the U.S. government does to promote the biotech industry. The Food and Water Watch organization did a beautiful report showing how the entire State Department, using WikiLeaks leaks, showed how the entire State Department is basically an enforcement wing and a bully around the world for GMOs.
Just leading on from that, Jeffrey. Hello, I'm Ollie, by the way. I heard a story. Well, we have a friend, Sal, who's actually from Colombia, and she was getting loads of reports from her friends and some of the smaller news companies in Colombia, of part of what you were just talking about, the free trade agreement that America drew up with Colombia. And immediately, pretty much after this was signed, Monsanto's there was an act to make illegal the growing of all native crops. And this was something that really wasn't covered in mainstream media at all. I was really shocked that the BBC had pretty much they had a very small section on the South American section that wasn't covered, and it basically it was a complete a kind of there were mass protests all over Bogota. The police were enforcing that. There was a case where the police seized 70 tons of natural rice and dumped it all in a landfill. The police were basically acting as thugs, as paid thugs. There was video footage of the police having they turned their jackets inside out so you couldn't see their identification numbers, and were literally just roaming through rural villages, arresting, beating, and killing farmers because they wouldn't want to give up their crop. Now it was a very odd time, and my friend had family that were involved in the protests in Bogota. We've really got no coverage of this over in the States, and over in the UK. Since then, there's been an Australian TV company that's covered it, but yeah, and then it was just kind of all retracted. I think after about 2 weeks into it, the whole thing got retracted, and then business as normal. But yeah, but there was, again, it was what you were just talking about, the free trade agreement, and how Monsanto's influenced the powers that be in Colombia to enforce their wish, basically their greed, the monster that is Monsanto's. I just wasn't sure if you're aware of that or not, as because of such little coverage it's had over here. What?
I was aware that the farmers' protests did ultimately win and reverse a restrictive law regarding seeds. Um, there's an effort to eliminate worldwide on a on a country by country basis and sometimes continent basis the ability of farmers to access a diversity of seeds and only use the seeds that are approved, meaning the biotech company seeds, essentially, the agribusiness seeds. Now, this is a huge danger, a huge danger. What it does is, of course, it's a kind of
Monopolizes, I guess.
it monopolizes it. It turns farmers into serfs, so they have to go to the biotech industry and the seed companies. But there's 1.4 billion farmers in the world that save seeds, and they produce seeds from the best producing plants each year. So they are creating really robust seeds that work in different climates and geographies, that work in different parts of the land and resist certain diseases. And this diversity is the source of our food security, especially at a time of global climate change. But the biotech industry and the seed companies, which are kind of the same thing, want to replace all those with their limited genetics from the catalogs, which puts at risk the entire food supply.
Yeah, that's what I'm kind of worried about, that
You
we're going
think?
to invest everything in one basket of eggs. And then and I just read an article about the way that plants will try to adapt to global warming and genetically adapting. But when we have genetics that have been introduced scientifically by the mad scientists, we don't know what the effect that is going to have on their ability to survive the changes in the environment that we are going to see. But if we had the diversity, then it's like, I think, down in South America where they grow potatoes. They don't just grow one kind of potato. They have 16 or I don't know how many different kinds of
Hundreds
potatoes.
in Peru,
Hundreds.
yeah.
Little purple ones and red ones and green ones and yellow ones and all the kinds of potatoes that there are. And one year a frost may come and kill a bunch of them, but the other ones will survive. It's just common sense. And that when we started planting monocrops on a large scale in the Green Revolution and after World War II, then we entered into that realm where we are at risk of losing everything. And I think this is even related to the potato famine in Ireland, where they put all their eggs in one potato basket and had a disease come through and wipe it out.
Yeah, this is a serious problem, and that's what's happened in the U.S. Someone did a PhD thesis on seed biodiversity and found that the farmers in advance of GMOs had 400 to 500 choices for seed input, and after the GMO companies came along, they bought up all their seed companies, and they had 4 or 5 choices where to get their seeds. And the biotech industry's plans, as developed in Monsanto's case, for sure, they remove the best non-GMO options. So there was a reduction in seed offerings for the non-GMO ones by 2/3, according to one study, and an increase in the options for the GMO products. And in some cases, like in India, there are states where you just can't get non-GMO cotton seeds because the biotech industry took over, Monsanto took over, and has made it a prerequisite that if you're going to sell Monsanto's seeds, you can't sell anyone else. They just buy the influence, forcing the hand of farmers. And so this, of course, has a lot of repercussions. They can then raise the prices dramatically, and have. Sometimes the seeds in India for the same type of cotton seeds are as much as 1,000 times or even 4,000 times what it costs an American farmer per gram. Usually it's not that much, but it can be. The seed cost in the United States has gone up dramatically. Some farmers tell me they can't get the seeds for their area, for their climate and geography and the non-GMO brands anymore. In Brazil, there was a very popular seed variety. Monsanto bought the company for soy and tried to eliminate it from the market. And then the quasi-government organization came in and said, we'll create seeds, because it was obvious they couldn't trust Monsanto to do what was in the farmer's interest, because Monsanto was just doing what was in their interest.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there is a conspiracy to take over our food supply? I always, I bring up things that I think about on this show, and people think I'm a conspiracy theorist. And I don't like that term myself because it's not a theory.
You only believe in
Pardon?
You only believe in conspiracies that are true, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. In late January of 1999, Monsanto's consultant Arthur Anderson told a biotech conference that Monsanto's executives had answered their question of what is your ideal future in 15 to 20 years. And they said, a world in which 100% of all commercial seeds are genetically engineered and patented. And Anderson worked backwards from that goal to create this strategy and tactics to achieve it. So it's not, that's the reality. In fact, at the same conference, another biotech company projected a 95% takeover of all commercial seeds within 5 years. So they're planning to replace nature, to eliminate the products of the billions of years of evolution with an irreversible, self-propagating pollution of the gene pool. And it's not just seeds anymore. They've already introduced genetically engineered mosquitoes. They want to introduce fruit flies. They want to introduce salmon and the rest of the fish. They want to genetically engineer out the mothering instinct of livestock to put them in factory farms. They are basically wanting to fit nature into the industrial model, because the industrial model doesn't fit into nature.
They want to eliminate the mothering instinct in animals?
Yeah, I got that one from my friend Andy Kimbrell, yeah.
Oh my God, did everybody hear that? They want to eliminate the mothering instinct in some animals.
So it seems to me that they're pretty much across the board. They're as you just said, that the long-term goals are nothing short of world global food domination and agricultural domination, and obviously they're involved in Monsanto's involved in bioweapons and biotech. And it seems to me an extortion, obviously, as well, where they kind of putting, when the seeds get spread, they're actually suing the farmers, and as you see, they've got the whole revolving door going with the White House as well. Now, I'm sure some listeners are listening here and might want to do something to try and stop this from happening. But are there any practical steps that you might that you could recommend to the listeners? Obviously, I'm sure awareness is one of them just in itself. That's the first step of the way. But are there any practical steps that you'd actually to actually try and help put a stop to this, the chaos from the monster that is Monsanto's?
Funny you should ask. I happen to have several ideas. Okay, so awareness is first. A lot of people don't know what a GMO is. So now they realize it. What do? They want to avoid it. So first of all, to get more awareness, and in order to convince you to avoid it, we have resources. ResponsibleTechnology.org is our website. We're the Institute for Responsible Technology. We have lots of information there. We have products that you can get at seedsofdeception.com. It's named after my first book, Seeds of Deception. The most effective communication and education tool that we've created so far is the movie Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives. And that's available at geneticroulettemovie.com or at the other websites that I gave you. Now, while you're there, sign up for the newsletter to stay in touch with us, and we'll keep you informed about petitions and things you need to sign and things you need to do and phone calls, etc., on an ongoing basis with that. The biggest thing happening, I think the world's biggest compilation of voices on GMOs is the GMO Summit coming up at the end of the month, October 25th to 27th. 20 different interviews that John Robbins and I conduct. 10 that's given on the 25th, 6th, and 7th, and 10 more over the next 5 weeks. That's at gmosummit.org. That's very, very significant. We're putting a lot of attention. The amount of effort to create this is equal to more than one person working on it full time for a year. And then once you're ready to avoid GMOs, that's the next thing. So you're right. Awareness is the first. The second is avoiding. To avoid, you can go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com. non-GMOshoppingguide.com.
So I guess that's buy local and organic. Usually helps with local farmers who are doing organic produce as well, right?
As long as it's non-GMO.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, you don't want to buy local GM corn or local GM zucchini or yellow squash.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that it's local is not going to necessarily remove the toxin. So you want to buy, so if you go to non-GMOshoppingguide.com or download the iPhone application free, Shop No GMO, it talks about the 4 ways to avoid GMOs. Buying organic, as you said, buy products that say non-GMO, especially the Non-GMO Project verified seal. Buy products listed in the shopping guide, there's over 10,000, all verified by the Non-GMO Project. Or avoid the at-risk ingredients. And there are 9 GM food crops: soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, papaya from Hawaii or China, and a little zucchini and yellow squash. Now, there's also derivatives of GM soy and corn: dextrose, maltodextrin, etc., cellulose, maybe from cotton or whatever. Those are listed in the shopping guide as the hidden invisible ingredients. And then there's the milk and meat of animals that have been fed GMOs, and then there's the milk of animals that have been injected with genetically modified bovine growth hormone.
Yes, we've been trying to do that, trying to avoid those, and for a little while anyway. I'm sure that my pre-diabetic metabolism probably can be related back to glyphosate, I think.
So if there's a break, go to gmosummit.org and then enroll, and then look at that download. There's a specific chart, and diabetes is mentioned there. Take a look at the unbelievable correlation of the introduction or the growth curve of Roundup use and GMO acreage, and take a look at how closely it matches with the diabetes curve. It's just amazing. And we can talk about why that may be the case. When rats, I think this was mice maybe, were fed GM products, there was a dramatic change in the production levels of their genes. So their gene regulation changed. And the largest concentration of the genes that changed were those that handle insulin. When another study, there was rats that the blood sugar levels went up 10%. If you look at the biochemical properties of Roundup, they can affect insulin. So there's a lot of people, and when I speak to audiences around California, around the world, around the country particularly, and say, have you gotten rid of GMOs and it felt better? I've had a number of people say blood sugar problems or diabetes went away, disappeared after switching to a non-GMO diet. That's very impressive.
That's amazing. I mean, this is all so astounding as we go into the Affordable Care Act and all of that. And everybody seems to want to be able to go to the doctor, and there's a lot of people that need to go to the doctor, have to go to the doctor. And I'm wondering how much of that need to go to the doctor is based on the GMOs and the chemicals, other chemicals as well, that they spray on all of our food products. You know what I mean? I mean, it was. I've mentioned this on the show. It's no coincidence that after World War II, and they introduced all these chemicals into our agriculture, that was 20, 30 years later, they came up with the idea of privatizing health care just in time for all the cancer that was coming up, all of the other diseases. And it's so they're going to capitalize on our ill health because of their introduction of chemicals into our environment.
Yeah, the amount of testimonials that I've heard from people who've gotten better and from these diseases and disorders is now completely predictable. If I go to, let's say I go to Humboldt County, and I have an audience of, say, 300 people, and out of that, I'm guessing with the people that come just to hear me and they're not part of a conference, they're not part of the general public, there may be 100 people that raise their hand when I say, how many people have really removed GMOs from your diet significantly? And out of the 100, I might say, all right, how many of you noticed an improvement in your health when you got rid of GMOs? 60 to 80, well, maybe 70 to 80 would probably keep their hands up. And then we would see a big amount around gastrointestinal disorders. We'd probably hear ulcerative colitis, acid reflux, irritable bowel. People don't usually talk about constipation, but they sometimes tell me in private. Hemorrhoids. Two people in audiences have gotten bold enough to tell me about their hemorrhoids. And we'd hear some maybe we'd hear a reproductive thing about being able to overcome infertility. I've only heard that a few times. That's certainly linked in the literature. We would definitely hear allergies and maybe asthma and maybe autoimmune diseases. There'd be a big group that improved on brain fog and fatigue. So brain fog, fatigue, allergies, gastrointestinal disorders, and headaches, and skin problems. Those are the ones we see every time in a sizable group, every single time. And then you have some more of the specialty or boutique answers like diabetes, high blood pressure, kidney disorders, things like that. Now, you'll also get kids for ADD or autism symptoms from time to time, and aggression, depression is more popular, sometimes aggression. But these are things that come. I have to emphasize this. The reason I emphasize it is that I'm the only one in the world who's doing this, who's traveling around asking groups like this. And I just want to tell everyone that this is what people are reporting. Now, when people get rid of GMOs, they may switch to organic or reduced processed foods. And so that introduces potential cofactors as to what's causing the problem. But they're getting rid of the same problem the animals feeding studies show are afflicting the lab animals. And also, when livestock are taken off of GMOs, there's no cofactors because it's just a substitution of non-GM soy or corn for GM soy and corn. So you don't have to deal with organic organic animals or whatnot. And they're getting better from the same problems. The same problems. And the same problems are on the rise in the U.S. population. So it's really an unbelievable match. Now, having said that, even though this may be one of the greatest health and environmental catastrophes we're facing, it's one of the easiest of the majors to deal with. And that's because we don't require a bailout from the Obama administration. We don't require a federal law to be passed. We can get rid of GMOs by creating a tipping point of consumer rejection. In Europe, when the gag order was lifted on Dr. Arpad Pusztai on February 16, 1999, 3 weeks after the San Francisco Biotech Conference announced that they would have a 95% replacement of all commercial seeds within 5 years, their entire schedule was derailed because over 700 articles about the health dangers of GMOs were written in Europe in 1 month alone. Within 10 weeks of the gag order being lifted, and here was a scientist who was a pro-GM scientist who discovered that GMOs were dangerous, had a chance to talk about what he knew. That was all that Europe needed. Unilever, then Nestle's, then everyone else publicly committed to stop using GM ingredients, and that's what drove GMOs out of Europe. It wasn't the European Commission. It was McDonald's and Burger King and Nestle's, the same companies that sell us GMOs in the United States.
Yeah.
So we think a small percentage of U.S. shoppers, 5%, would be sufficient to create the tipping point. In the natural food industry, it's tipped. If you go to the Expo West Natural Food Conference, the demand for non-GMO is huge. There are over 10,000 products that are already verified, and there's thousands of others in the pipeline. Now what we're going to see is the most important window of activism in the history of the U.S. when a non-health food product declares itself as non-GMO and sits on the shelf in Walmart or Safeway, and as soon as it declares, the clock starts ticking. If we can increase the sales of the non-GMO product, which erodes the market share of the brand leaders that are still using GMOs, every other brand manager in the industry says, I don't want to be second to declare non-GMO in my product category. I don't want to lose market share simply by using an ingredient that no one wants, that no one's looking for, that gives no consumer benefit. I'm going to get non-GMO while I can, while there's still supply before the next growing season. And so we are looking to engineer a tipping point against genetically engineered foods.
Yeah.
And it's working.
I called the makers of Honey Bunches of Oats my favorite cereal, right? And and then I got on this GMO thing, and I called them up, and I said, I knew the answer, but I asked them, do you use GMO in this product? And the lady wouldn't tell me, but I told her my concern. She wrote it all down, and then she sent me information about the products that they have that don't contain GMO. But if a lot of more people did that, if they called those companies up, they have a 1-800 number on the cereal box somewhere or another product. Spend a little time and call them up. It may help a little. But like you said, if people stop not buying the GMO food, and it would help if we had more labeling of non-GMO products, and there does exist some products that says non-GMO on there. I think that's probably the secret there. Our government, I think, our regulatory part of our government has been co-opted by the corporations that they're supposed to regulate. And so, like you said, probably we shouldn't wait around for the government to do this. We have to do it ourselves. And like Jeffrey, you've become a scientist because you had to study this stuff.
Well, I'm not. I mean,
well, I mean, not that you're doing experiments, but that you had to wrap your mind around all of this science in order to understand what's going on. And most people aren't able to do that, But through shows like this and through all of the things that you do, raising consciousness is probably all we have to save us, is just to raise our consciousness. But we're going to have a little responsibility and try to understand what's going on. Like we don't, when we get ill, we go to the doctor, and the doctor gives us a pill. But that, the pill is just a pharmaceutical industry's answer to the chemical industry's poisoning of us. So we're all going to, I'm just making this commentary, we're all going to have to take responsibility for the food that we eat and look and see what's in it, and, raise our consciousness about what's in it. And there's certain things in the food that are ingredients that we need to even find out about.
I think it's going on the point that food is medicine, and what we eat becomes us, essentially. And I think when you're mixing things like human genes in food that we're eating and different kind of animal genes in vegetables, it brings up a lot of questions. What's that doing on a long-term basis? How is it affecting? Like you just brought up a number of different conditions that could be associated with that are associated with glyphosate. One of the questions I had for you is that, would you say that they were the sole reason, or a significantly contributing factor to a lot of these conditions that you've mentioned?
Well, they're obviously not the sole factor. I mean, before glyphosate was patented in 1974 as an herbicide, there were still these diseases. I mean, the diseases were there. I mean, gluten sensitivity, for example, has increased since big time since '74. That was before GMOs were introduced. There was probably a big spike in it when GMOs were introduced.
Yeah.
So it's an exacerbating factor. Let's take a look at gluten, for example. If you look at the nexus of gluten sensitivity and celiac, you see an immune system response, you see gut bacteria problems, you see holes in the gut or gut permeability, and you see suppressed digestion through damage to the microvilli, etc. When you look at GMOs, you see immune system responses and damage. You see killing of gut bacteria because the glyphosate kills the beneficial gut bacteria, and it could cause gut bacteria overgrowth of the negative stuff. Holes in the gut because the gut bacteria that might be overgrowing produces zonulin, which could open up the gaps between the cells and the gut and the walls. Then you have damage to the microvilli, just like in the celiac disease, or similar in its shape. And then you have suppression of digestive enzymes, which can make the whole thing get worse. So very similar sets of symptoms. Now, you can be reacting to gluten without ever eating GMOs. But if you eat GMOs, I think it will make you more sensitive so that if you didn't eat GMOs, you might not get gluten sensitivity. But so it makes you more vulnerable to the disease, in my opinion, and that the symptoms may be more pronounced, and or if you continue to eat it, your cure will be less effective. So Dr. Emily Limner from Chicago said that when she prescribes a gluten-free diet to her gluten-sensitive patients, she says to get rid of GMOs at the same time because the recovery is faster and more complete.
So what you've noticed essentially is a direct correlation between many of the conditions that you've mentioned and the increase in GMOs on the food market.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, the curve.
Well, the thing is, we don't look at the foods; we look at the acreage. So, because that'll inform. Like, you're going to eat this similar amount of soy and corn that may grow over time, but the percentage of the soy and corn is increasing. And if you match that along those charts, then you can see the correlation is stunning. It's just stunning. I mean, deaths from senile dementia, deaths from Parkinson's, autism, they're all right there in the charts.
I guess that's on a human factor, and I guess also Monsanto's has been held responsible, I believe, in Europe due to the decline in the bee population. Which will in turn have a knock-on effect for the food supply in both the United States and across the world. But I mean, again, with Monsanto's and the government, there seems to be this revolving door. They're seeming to be more and more into office. There seem to be chief execs from Monsanto's crossing over into the White House, and it seems more and more that they're almost becoming the similar entity. And I mean, it's tackling something like that it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal to try and take on. Essentially, it's getting more merged and mingled.
Well, I mean, the classic example, Ali, is the Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor was put into the position by Obama as the U.S. food czar. He's in charge of food safety for the United States, and I think he's probably responsible for more food-related deaths than anyone in human history.
And he's for the safety.
Yeah, because he was Monsanto's former attorney. Then he became the deputy commissioner of policy at the FDA when the FDA was told to promote biotechnology. So they created a position specifically for Michael Taylor while the GMO policy was being created. His policy falsely claimed that the agency wasn't aware of information showing that GMOs were different. At the time, we now know that every scientist that was commenting said GMOs are not only different but dangerous, and they should have testing, but the policy said no testing was necessary by the companies. The companies did not have to test for the safety of GMOs. They didn't have to label GMOs. The same like Monsanto, who told us that PCBs, Agent Orange, and DDT were safe, can put their crops and crap on the market without even telling the FDA or consumers. And this was Monsanto's former attorney in charge of that policy, and then he became Monsanto's chief lobbyist and vice president, and now he's the U.S. food safety czar.
Yeah, and he didn't bother to look in the dictionary to see what modified meant. Genetically modified can't be the same. If it's modified.
Or how about this? the Monsanto goes to the patent office and says it's totally unique. They go to the FDA
Yeah.
and say it's totally the same.
Yeah, exactly. Both ways. You're having it both ways. But if you're a rich corporation, I understand that. I don't know. I couldn't find it again, but I found a reference that said uh, that Monsanto on its board had a former CIA director.
I don't know. I haven't been studying their board members. People have asked me that through the years, and I'm hoping someone does and provides all the information to me. But I've got my hands full. I mean, there's so much evidence
Yeah.
now coming out. I mean, the Seralini study was showing that GMOs and Roundup create multiple massive tumors, organ damage, and early death. You've got the study by Judy Carman that shows pigs that eat GMOs have inflammatory stomachs and enlarged uteruses and other problems. The study showing the damage of the blood from the Bt toxin. Then there's all the collecting of all these case studies and testimonials from people. I think I'll be spending some time linking these different diseases to GMOs. Now that we have this great new paper, as we started out by Anthony Samsel and Stephanie Seneff. I mean the work that they've done, and they have more papers in the pipeline. So we have a pretty powerful case now to convince an average person to run away from GMOs. And we don't need the average person. We only need a small percentage of people in order to kick it out of the market for the tipping point.
Yes. That like the 100th monkey syndrome almost. Uh, I think we're starting to get calls. Is that okay to take calls?
Sure.
And I just have I forgot this. Someone called just before I came on, and we're a community radio station. We go pretty far though, but this one woman is missing a dog, a red chow, 75 pounds, lost 8 miles up Reed Mountain Road. His name is Jordan, and if you've seen this little red chow, it's not that little. Call 223-3133. And I think Larry has a caller for us. Do you, Larry? He's not listening.
Well, I want to ask you. I want to mention something because that was a good segue for pet owners.
Yeah.
We have heard from veterinarians and from pet owners that when dogs and cats are taken off of GMO pet food, there's improvements in the gastrointestinal problems like diarrhea and in allergies like itching.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it a lot. So do an experiment. Also, the liveliness, the happiness of the dogs and cats has been shown to be different, and the quality of the coats of the fur and all that. So I would like to suggest that the pet owners in the audience do the experiment immediately.
Yes.
And then
It's hard to find that good dog food, but I think we have a pet store in town that has good dog and cat food. We have a caller, Larry. Okay, here we go. Couple of calls. Hello, caller.
Hi, Bud. Harvey here.
Hi, Harvey.
And great show today.
Thanks.
And hello, Jeffrey. Well, I've worked up quite an appetite listening to the show. And, well, I just want to say that, oh my God, OMG, it's GMO. You know, the problem, I'm sure that people on the food stamp program, the Republicans cut the food stamp program. Well, now I realize why. It's out of the goodness of their heart. They didn't want the poor people to eat GMO food. They were saving everybody. Thank you, Republicans, for being so sweet. But at the same time, the people who are thrown off the food stamp program, they are broke, and they're going to eat the cheapest form of food, which means they're really going to munch down on GMOs because that's what fills you up. And I feel really sorry for them. Essentially, we are the experiment. We are what we eat. And for what end, I don't know. I don't know why we are the experiment, but it seems that way. And our food purchases are easily tracked when we use Visa, credit cards, debit cards, checks, club cards. They know down to the crop what you're eating, and they can sell all that information, like grocery chains can sell the information of what you're eating, or the Visa, or anybody, to Monsanto. They know everything, and then that information can be sold to the to the medical pharmaceutical industrial complex, and they'll know exactly what kind of medicines to market to you because they'll know what you've eaten and they know what diseases you're going to get. So
Yeah.
it's a terrible, terrible thing, and I want to thank you for telling us about it. And can you give the websites again about where we can go to learn about GMO? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. So I'll give you all the websites. I'll give you a moment to get your pens out because what you said was interesting about tracking. The UK government, which is pro-GMO, had been telling the population that GMOs pose absolutely no problem. There's not even a worry about it. We can just eat it with confidence. But privately, one of their agencies was working out a relationship with the supermarkets to use that kind of information you talked about, which is available for those that use the food loyalty card, the card that gives you discounts, that tracks what your purchases are. And they wanted to see if those people who were eating GMOs ended up having higher rates of food allergies, cancer, and other problems. So this was a shock when this was released and leaked to the paper, because everyone was saying, well, if you said it's so good, why are you using us as the experimental animals? And so the embarrassed government decided to cancel the study. And so they'd actually have no post-marketing surveillance whatsoever. No one's looking to see if people are getting sick from GMOs. In fact, the Canadian government promised in 2002 to monitor the health of Canadians, but by the end of next year, they had already canceled it, saying it was too difficult. So here are the websites. responsibletechnology.org. From there, you can sign up to be part of our Tipping Point network with over 10,000 activists and over 100 different groups all around the country. Find one in your area or create one. We have a speaker training program. We have a free newsletter, which is very important for certain types of click and send activism and to keep you informed. And there's a lot of information, free audios and videos on responsibletechnology.org. We have some books and DVDs at seedsofdeception.com. Seedsofdeception.com is named after my book, Seeds of Deception. And then we have the most popular of our videos, Genetic Roulette. It has its own website, geneticroulettemovie.com. And then to remove GMOs from your diet, you can go to nongmoshoppingguide.com or download the iPhone application Shop No GMO. And finally, I think, we have, well, there's more, but GMOsummit.org is going to give you an opportunity to hear people like Vandana Shiva and Andy Cabral and Robin O'Brien and a veterinarian and an MIT Harvard-trained hormone expert for women's hormones, and et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, if you have gluten-related disorders, we don't even have a link from our homepage yet to this one I'm going to give you, but glutenandgmos.com, we're about to release the information about that after a few tweaks, but you can read it in the meantime since I've been talking about it.
Good. Now we have some other calls coming in. Now, this is Bud Rogers Edge III. We have Jeffrey Smith on our show today. He's an expert and lecturer on GMOs. And so we have a caller. Hello, caller.
Is this me?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Jeffrey, I really enjoyed your talk at the Heirloom Expo in Santa Rosa.
Thank you.
Basically, I remember there's a question I wanted to ask. It was about wine. I know there's a lot of wine drinkers up here in Northern California. And the question was about the GMO yeast used in a lot of wine. And I remember hearing that Frey Vineyards is one of the only ones that uses non-GMO yeast. But with so many organic wines on the market, I'm wondering, are the other yeast that the other organic wines using GMO? And I'll take my question off the air. Thanks.
Yes, I am aware of the Frey Vineyards. They are labeled non-GMO project verified, making them the first, maybe the only wine in the world that has that distinction. And that's not well appreciated by certain other aspects of the wine industry because it kind of blows their cover because they may be using the GMO yeast. Organic wines are not allowed to use GMO enzymes. So Fry Vineyards would not be the only one that's non-GMO, but they're the only one that's been verified as non-GMO by the Non-GMO Project.
Good. And yet another caller. Let's take that call. Hello, caller.
Hi.
Hi.
I don't know if people are aware of it, but a lot of natural food stores like Kashi and stuff actually donated to defeat the GMO initiative we had in California. It's just beyond me that a company that professes to like help people and be a really cool thing actually contributed to the campaign to defeat GMO.
I'm afraid I've lost all audio.
Can you hear
Now
me?
I can hear. Now I can hear. Yeah.
You there?
Now he can't hear you. Speak up.
I said that Kashi actually donated to help defeat the GMO initiative in California, and that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, he was talking about how.
And I got it. I got it.
Okay.
So in reality, it's a little different than that, but by degree. Kashi is owned by Kellogg's. Kellogg's donated to block Prop 37. Kashi, by the way, was completely ignoring the GMO issue, and all of their soy was GM soy, all of their corn was GM corn, until a retailer spilled the beans on social media. It was picked up by USA Today. It was picked up all over, and they freaked out, and they quickly announced in a press release that they were going to become non-GMO project verified, and everything would be non-GMO by 2015. So what that means is they have been outed. And I know that they were set up for a fall, because when I've told people who were eating Kashi, who were thinking it was a healthy, natural breakfast, when I told them it was like their soy was 100% GM soy or something like that, people freaked out. They got so angry. So the situation was totally ripe. And a lot of companies just kicked them out of the shelves when they realized it. But it wasn't Kashi that donated against Prop 37. It was Kellogg's. Kashi is owned by Kellogg's. There's others like that where the parent company bought the natural food or the organic company, and sometimes the natural product has no say where the parent company will donate its money. So it's an interesting thing where it's like the parent doing one thing and the children doing something else.
Good. Do we have another call, Larry? I think we have yet another call. Yeah, it's a popular show. Okay. Hello, caller.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. How you doing today?
Oh, it's a great day. First of all, Brad, I just want to thank you. You put on some of the most interesting shows on radio I've ever heard in my life, and Jeffrey Smith is just incredible. I tip my hat to him. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thanks.
A thought occurred to me, somewhere along the lines of how Congress can pass health care laws, but yet they opt out of the system and have a platinum package for themselves. I'm wondering what's going on in that congressional cafeteria. I'm wondering if they have, it would be telling. I mean, either they're so dumb they don't even know what they're doing and eating this stuff, or have they in fact, eliminated GMOs from their little private eating establishments in Congress. And that's about it.
Let me respond to that.
Info on that. If not, it certainly would be an interesting factoid.
So when the Obama White House was set up, we learned by a reporter that the Bush administration had maintained a strict organic kitchen, and that Laura Bush was insistent that it be all organic. And of course, we believe that the Obama kitchen is also non-GMO. The Monsanto kitchen, the Monsanto restaurant in their UK headquarters years ago, was non-GMO, according to the manager, who said that because of complaints or concerns by their own customers, which was Monsanto's own people.
Huh.
And I talked to a former Monsanto scientist. He said 3 of his colleagues tested the milk from cows treated with bovine growth hormone, and they found so much of a cancer-promoting hormone called IGF-1 in the milk, the 3 Monsanto scientists refused to drink milk thereafter. One bought his own cow.
Wow.
Which leads me on to a question that I had. I'm sure a lot of listeners who kind of have the intention and want to boycott GMO products. One of the factors they might take into consideration is the financial factor of it might be more expensive to buy organic products, where they want to buy organic products but they just can't afford it in a declining economy. Well, one of the ideas I've got there, I mean, if they have the space, grow your own food, and then you can definitely ensure that it's organic produce that you're growing on your own land. I just want to know what your thoughts were on that, on people that really did want to kind of boycott it, but are struggling to pay their way financially.
So I don't use the word boycott.
Yeah.
Because boycott tends to be you make a sacrifice by not buying something because of a cause.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's enough information about the health dangers. You want to choose a non-GMO product to save your life or your health, and that's not really a boycott. Now, there's 2 answers to this. You can get non-GMO products that are no different in price. Ragu spaghetti sauce uses GMOs for their Ragu Chunky, but non-GMO for their Ragu Light. They don't mention that it's non-GMO, but you read the ingredients. It's got olive oil. The other one, soybean oil. It's clearly one is GMO and one's not. So you don't have to pay more for those type of things. If people start cooking from scratch rather than buying processed foods, typically they will be saving money, and that shouldn't be an issue. However, we also now know that many grains and types of grains, wheat, barley, etc., are sprayed with Roundup before harvest as a ripening agent. Same with fruits and vegetables, a lot of them. It gets absorbed in, you can't wash it off.
Yeah.
So Roundup, and they've just increased the allowable levels of Roundup by up to 30 times. So it could be 1 million times higher than the amount that's linked to growth of cancer cells. So to really protect yourself now, buying non-GMO is the first option. Buying organic is more and more important, especially for pregnant women. So, because it's linked to Roundup is linked to birth defects. So I would say the amount of money that would be invested in your health by avoiding Roundup-drenched food will end up being a fraction of the amount of money you might end up spending in healthcare and in lost earned income opportunities, etc. So the Europeans spend a lot higher percentage of their disposable income on food, and I think for the time being, until we've kicked out both Roundup and GMOs, if it comes to it, switch to organic, pay the extra, and take notes about how better you feel and how better your health is, and let us know at the following email address if you've noticed changes: healthy@responsibletechnology.org. healthy@responsibletechnology.org.
Okay, we got to go now, Jeffrey. We're right on to the last second. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
You're most welcome.
That's all for Edge of the Herd this month. Next